Hey guys, welcome back to Out of Ink. I'm Olivia, and I got into comics at a really good time. I'm not trying to brag or say, oh yeah, my books are better than yours. I just feel like I got into them at a great time. It was just around the beginning of the MCU and the post-Dark Knight hype. Both Marvel and DC reboots were fresh, and a lot of great games and shows were not too far off into the horizon. One of the books I got into during these early days was the Earth 1 series. Earth 1 was a line of contained stories published as graphic novels. Each one was a reimagining of the origins of several DC heroes. Apparently, this series of books got their origins as a universe created after the DC comic series Trinity, which is a comic I love, so I'm surprised I didn't know that until I was looking stuff up for this video. So, you learn something new every day. Anyway, I love this set of books, and I plan on talking about all of them here, but today we're starting with the first volume of the first one, Superman Earth 1, written by J. Michael Straczynski and with art by Shane Davis. Superman's Earth 1 focuses on a young Clark Kent trying to decide what he wants to do with his life. At first, this just seems to be about what kind of career he wants, and that is part of it, but it's more of the debate of if he wants to be Superman or not. In this universe, Superman was an idea made by Clark's parents, Jonathan and Martha. It's not talked about a ton, but the idea was that since Clark was born with all these powers, that he should use them to help people, but at the cost that Clark would have to hide who he really is. Everything about the Superman identity is broken down to its simplest concepts. The costume comes from Martha reweaving the threads of the blankets that sheltered Clark when they found him as a baby, since the costume would have to be as strong as him. The S is something Jonathan came up with, and Martha is the one who told Clark that wearing a mask would only frighten those whose trust Clark's needs so much. I love this because it grounds Superman's narrative so well. What I mean by this is that as time has moved on, Superman's backstory tends to focus more on his Kryptonian heritage rather than his Kansas upbringing. One of the worst examples of this being in Man of Steel, after Superman and Lois kiss. Yeah, I get it. It's cute. It's flirty or whatever, but this exchange has stuck with me as showing the problem with a lot of modern interpretations of Superman, that despite living on Earth for almost his entire life, his experiences on Earth are always overshadowed by his Kryptonian heritage, a culture and people he didn't really know. In Earth 1, I feel like this is done perfectly. Clark grows up knowing he's different, but without the answers, he just lives his life. It doesn't seem to bother him that he doesn't know anything about where he came from. It's more about the feelings of isolation he experiences as a result of his incredible powers and the need to either hide them or do something with them. This debate does take up a good chunk of this book. Generally, this book does have a calmer pace and is more introspective, examining the pros and cons of being Superman and watching young Clark figure things out. Not to say that nothing Superman-like doesn't happen. An extraterrestrial threat named Tyrell holds Earth hostage to draw out Clark as he is determined to eliminate the last Kryptonian, which is pretty much a confirmation of no Supergirl in Earth 1 canon. Now, I say this assuming that they are not returning to Earth 1 at all. It seems that this story is self-contained, they're done at 3 volumes, but you never know. It would be pretty easy to explain that Supergirl was in the Phantom Zone, or they missed her as she escaped Krypton. I don't know. There's room for her to be in Earth 1 canon. It doesn't seem likely at this point. Anyway, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Tyrell isn't the most exciting villain. He's a pretty typical try to force the hero to sacrifice himself for his world douche. His design is alright, but he reminds me a lot of the Zarnians, so he's not really treading any new ground, and with him sharing almost the same power set as Superman and very similar technology to the stuff we see in the Man of Steel movie, this didn't help with the feeling I had about this graphic novel being connected to Man of Steel somehow, but I have no evidence to support this. Either way, Tyrell is pretty bland, but I will admit his backstory is pretty interesting, or rather the backstory of his people is interesting. Tyrell is a Daronian. Daron was the neighboring planet to Krypton and Krypton's enemy. The 2 planets each were highly developed, but what they lacked the other had, so when their planet's orbit brought them together, they would go to war. This cycle held both planets back from being able to reach their potential and advance enough to perfect space travel and go beyond their solar system, until a stranger appeared and offered them the technology they needed to eliminate Krypton on the condition that no Kryptonian survives. I find this to be so intriguing because I feel like this taps into our own fears of what life on other planets near us could mean for our planet. Outside of the story, Superman Earth 1 is one of the better modernizations of the Man of Steel, along with Superman Action Comics, which came out around the same time.
By the way, I made a video about that, so you should check that one out too.
Being almost a 90-year-old cultural icon, Superman has been changing over the years to keep up with the changing times. But the early 2010s was a big time for this in comics because of the new advances in technology and resulting social developments. I would argue it's the best because it felt the most natural. I felt like Superman's New 52 felt more commentary-ish, like, ooh, everyone has phones now. Ooh, look at social media, these kids today. But Earth 1 was just modern life. Yeah, they mentioned that newspapers and printed media are struggling, but that's just how it is now. At the time, I did notice this, and it was refreshing. The characters have a few more modern sensibilities without sacrificing who they are. Honestly, the biggest changes were with Jimmy Olsen, but I think he works the best here. This was the glow-up Jimmy's character needed to depart from the Norman Rockwell, Superman's pal, Twilight Zone. I would say that after I reread this book, I was really glad I did. When I first read it, I wrote it off as being a bit boring, but I appreciate it so much more now. I enjoy this examination of what it means to be Superman. Straczynski's writing works really well for this. I've read quite a bit of his previous work, mostly through his run on Spider-Man, and he does really well capturing the real quiet moments and the very human emotions that superhumans still have to deal with. So once you pair that with this solid art composition from Davis, you've got yourself a winner as far as comic teams go, at least in my opinion. Overall, Superman Earth 1 Volume 1 builds the solid foundation for a new take on the classic Superman origin. I'm truly so glad I revisited this book because I really do think I missed something the first time. This graphic novel might not be everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's worth your time, especially if you like slower-paced books or similar Superman titles like All-Star Superman. On that note, what is your favorite take on Superman's origin story? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time here on Out of Ink.